What was a house rule you had as a kid that you thought was completely normal until you grew up and realized not all households followed? Wakey time. No noise annoying mom and dad until 7 a.m. This was a really necessary one. I was a very early riser as a kid and I loved to talk to my parents. The rule was that I could come to their bed and curl up next to them, but I couldn't talk until 7. It was actually really nice, and made sure I got enough rest myself. Tragically, once I started drawing like 7 years later, mom and dad had to get up at 4 anyway to get me to the sheds. Sorry guys. My mom used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10-14 or so. The rule was that as long as I didn't make a mess and I'd put myself to bed by the time she got home, then I got $10 in the morning. We had to clean up the dishes as soon as everyone was finished eating, which included washing, rinsing, drying and putting away all dishes by hand and wiping down all surfaces and sweeping the floor and cleaning the kitchen sinks. It didn't matter if your favorite show was coming on, the dishes were never allowed to wait even for a minute. Also, no elbows on the table. I sat right next to my stepdad at the dinner table, and if I put my elbow on the table he would stab me in the arm with his fork. Used to piss me off so badly. We also had assigned places at the dinner table, and weren't allowed anywhere but bedroom or bathroom after bedtime. I had a friend sleep over one night, and in the middle of the night she told me she was thirsty and was going to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I freaked out. We weren't allowed to walk in our dining room unless we were using the room for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. We had family council every Sunday night after dinner. We would sit and say good things that happened that week, share our grievances if we had any, we always did, make a dinner menu, and assign chores. Frankly, it was stellar parenting. Though, if I mention it to my mother now, she will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. Edit. Thank you magical human who gave me gold. I had to wash the dishes every night, even if I wasn't home for the meal. There were times I'd get home from an away basketball game, I was in the team, after 10 p.m. and the dishes had sat since they finished reading around 6:30 p.m. My older brother's nightly chore? Take out the garbage. He'd be done in 2 minutes. I'd have 30+ minutes of washing, drying, putting away, and cleaning up the kitchen. My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected that I was hiding anything, they could, and did, go through anything to make sure. Dresser and desk drawers, bags, closet, car, whatever they felt was necessary. Even my mail was fair game. As a result, I got really good at hiding things. We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water, we were required to ask first. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents if I could eat or drink something if I was hungry or thirsty, and it was a hard habit to break when his mom told me I could literally eat or drink anything, other than the alcohol. It was so weird to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my boyfriend if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for getting an apple without asking first. It's just all so weird, but it used to be so normal. Not being allowed to leave the table until your meal was finished. I remember eating at a friend's house and looking really uncomfortable trying to finish a food I didn't like, only to be told, you don't have to finish it if you don't want to. Mind-blowing. No swearing, which includes the obvious as well as stupid, idiot, shut up and fart. My family had a thing we called the food blanket. When we'd eat casual meals, we'd lay a blanket on the living room floor and eat on it, like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of set the table, my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being really confused when I learned every family didn't have a food blanket. I had super laid-back parents, but there were a few certain things that they were randomly crazy strict about. No gum. No Play-Doh. No cereal with sugar is one of the top 3 ingredients. No Simpsons. I had basically no rules growing up, but those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum and I'm 35. Wasn't in my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we'd touch the walls with our dirty hands, so they made us piss in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and just poured it down the drain when we were done. Never thought it was strange until I brought it up to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. We weren't allowed to watch anything remotely sexual, like if people were kissing on screen my mom would freak out and run to cover the TV with a pillow and go blah blah cough loudly until it was over. Once I tried to see a PG-13 movie with my friends and my mom cried and my dad called me horrible for making her cry. I was 14. If I told my parents I was leaving at a certain time, I had to leave at that time. Let's say I told my parents I would leave a party at 9. I couldn't leave at 8:50, or I'd get yelled at, grounded. I couldn't leave at 9:10, or I would get yelled at or grounded. Same thing went for when I was leaving my house to go somewhere. I wasn't allowed to play in the living room as a child. If I played too loud in my room, I was also whipped. My dad's golden rule was children are meant to be seen, not heard. As a result, I allow my children to play anywhere in the house, as loudly as they want, as long as they clean it up. Just the other day my son held a rock concert in the living room with his new toy guitar and amplifier. The music was terrible, but his smile made it worth it. We had to have milk after dinner, but before bed. Asked my mom when I was older what that was about, and she realized we could have just had milk with dinner if we wanted, but she had been raised kosher, so it wasn't something she thought about. My mom freaks out about hearing commercials on TV. The second it goes to commercial break, it has to be muted. She also mutes it if she thinks it's about to go to commercial, even though sometimes she's wrong. And she doesn't really pay attention, so she doesn't notice a lot of the time when the commercials are over, so she leaves it on mute when the show is back on. It's very difficult to watch TV with her. I had to answer the phone. "Hello, this is first name last name speaking." Whenever I answered the phone, this is obviously in the 80s before caller ID on landlines, my mom tried to make my childhood friends do it too when they called me to play. As in, "Hi, can I talk to Jill Shalpin?" "Who is this?" "It's friend." "Well, friend, when you call this house and I answered the phone, you should say hello to me and then tell me that it's you, your first name and last name, before you ask to talk to Jill Shalpin." Boy, was I popular. My dad used to give me all the change in his pocket to leave him and my mom alone so they could shut their bedroom door and talk. It wasn't until many years later that I realized I was basically pimping out my mom. I come from a large family. Anytime we'd order pizza, we ordered a few different kinds because, obviously, there were different preferences. Any leftovers were left in their respective boxes and placed in the oven. I did that when I lived with a couple of roommates, and of course their reaction was, "I just burned this box. Why was this in the effing oven?" My mom had a second living room that nobody was allowed to walk into no matter what. Many moms had that room in the 50s and 60s. Plastic cover on a lampshade. We weren't allowed to get into the fridge or the cabinets without asking permission. My family was very poor and we had a limited food budget, so eating something without permission very possibly meant eating one ingredient of a meal my stepmother was planning on cooking within the next few days. I went to friends' houses and they just ate whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Not the rule, but still to this day I'm befuddled at my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico, horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would proceed to wake my brother and I up, simply to wait until the power came back on. For the life of me I cannot figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark, she just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. If you couldn't find something, and you asked someone for help, sibling or parent, and they found it for you, they got to punch you in the arm. My dad used to set up mine and my sister's Easter egg hunts in such a way we followed written clues from place to place, as way to help us learn to read. Until I was a young adult, I assumed that was how all kids did Easter egg hunts. If you don't get A's you don't eat at the table. I legit thought this was normal until I had dinner at a friend's house and my friend brought home a devastating report card. His parents were so supportive and loving. Maybe it's not a house rule, but when I was 6 my mom told me that if I behaved she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said see ya Monday and I knew. I grew up with 6 siblings. In the TV room, there were more people than couch seats. We had a rule that you couldn't steal someone's seat if they got up to go to the bathroom, get a drink, etc. My parents instituted it because of all the fights that would happen over seats. We all instantly realized how great a rule it was. No more arguments, but more importantly, your seat was safe for the night. I never thought it was a normal rule as defined by the OP, but it is a great rule that every family should have. In my family, youngest of 5, mom youngest of 5, grandma second oldest of 7 or 8, if someone stole your seat you basically had immunity and could do whatever to them outside serious bodily injury to get it back. Mostly this involved sitting directly on them and hoping you could fart. Usually, accompanied with licking your hand and putting it on their face. None of us have completely grown out of it, but we're all too busy these days to crowd a house and cause problems. First thing upon coming in the house you have to change into clean pants and wash your hands. Guests were exempt from the pants rule but not hand washing. If you took your shoes off while you were out you had to change your socks as well. I wasn't allowed to take a shower if I was home alone. I also learned at age 7 that other households close the bathroom door when using the toilet and keeping it open was weird. I learned that by keeping the door open at a friend's house, a friend walked by the bathroom, saw me, told their mom called my mom, and all of a sudden the new house rule was we closed the bathroom door when using the toilet. I can't take a shower if I'm home alone either. My dad apparently busted his head open slipping in the shower when he was living alone in college. He had to get up and drive himself to the emergency room. Now he won't let us shower if we're alone, because he's paranoid the same will happen to us. No sliced bread in the house. Like my parents were perfectly normal in every other sense. But I think my mom assumed the uncut bakery bread at the grocery store was better quality or healthier or something. Anyway, I remember going to a friend's house at like 13 years old and making a sandwich with pre-sliced bread. It was awesome. So much easier. My friend and her family laughed at my revelation, but I'm not kidding, it was a game changer. I'd been cutting my own slices for years and they were always slightly uneven and it made making sandwiches or having a piece of bread a bit of a pain. I went home and immediately demanded sliced bread. It took a bit of convincing but eventually my mom caved to my demands. To this day my parents still prefer unsliced bread, but whenever I visit my mom will go to the store and buy a sliced loaf just for me. My father never let us talk around the dinner table. Once when I was 15 I asked everyone around the table how they were doing and how their day was. My dad got up angrily after hurriedly finishing his meal and said, I can't stand people talking around a meal. If I wanted to talk to you I would. We finished our meal in silence. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth, before we got in bed. If they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs in our teeth and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them, but by the time we got to be 13 we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. I love thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I've even used that one while babysitting a fussy kid who doesn't want to brush their teeth, get ready for bed, and it helps a lot. Any of the kids, 7 of us, can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of the toy can't take it back until whoever's playing with it is done. If the toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be asked. My parents used the laissez-faire parenting style. No censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. Pretty awkward when I brought the VHS with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The parents were mortified. If I got hurt doing a certain activity I wasn't allowed to do that activity again. My mother ended that rule though when I broke my wrist snowboarding when I was 16 and didn't tell her until a month later when I couldn't move my wrist at all and it required surgery with a bone grout to repair. Share stories about your childhood household rules in the comment section below and please like and subscribe for more entertaining stories from AskReddit.